So, hello, welcome to our 30th anniversary of our website, Rumic World. This is an Ask Us Anything. We had a number of requests to take questions and appear on camera, I guess.
For the first time.
For the first time. So, we will be taking a number of really great questions that were submitted through Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and hopefully giving some interesting answers. So this is
I'm Dylan.
And I'm Harley. So we'll start off by reading your questions and answering them.
Hope you enjoyed. First question is congratulations on 30 years. This is from HollyB9000 at Gmail. My question is, what's the rarest item that you have in your collection? I think probably it kind of depends on how you qualify rareness. The rarest item is probably our shikishi, and shikishi are small square cardboard illustration boards, and manga artists or celebrities, athletes will sign them, and usually manga artists will do a drawing for them. And just in the last 4 years or so, we finally been able to get started on collecting Rumiko Takahashi ones. They're rare in the fact that they are one of one. You know, she does them individually.
Probably the other rarest thing I would say is the doujinshi from her high school days. Probably.
Yes.
Those, I mean, it's impossible to say how many of those were ever made.
200 maybe. At most.
That would probably be a generous estimation.
And then how many have survived to today?
Right, those would have just been things that were thrown away historically, probably by classmates that purchased them or were gifted them. But we managed to find one. We've only ever seen, I think, one for sale, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not in great shape, but of course it's just, it's literally just paper. So it's over 45 years old. It's older than
much
us.
older than that, probably 50.
Closing in on 50 years. And yeah, that it survived it all is amazing. And we're lucky enough to have one. So I'd say that those are our rarest, depending on how you sort of weigh that. But yeah.
So our next question is from Zorian FF9. He asks, here's my question. Do you think there's a chance for a Kyokai no Rine Kanketsuhin happening later with Ayami Sasaki, the final story adapted, just like Inuyasha got with Inuyasha Kanketsuhin, the final act? Probably not.
I would
be my. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of material left for them to animate. However, I don't realistically think that. Unfortunately, I don't think that Rine was probably popular enough to.
Yeah, I don't think it was popular enough. I don't think it was, had the cultural impact that her other series had before that. Also, it's kind of an awkward amount. Zorian mentioned Ayame. I think if they did do something, they would. Huge if. It would simply be the final, 10 chapter storyline. It wouldn't be going back and filling in things that they skipped over. They didn't really skip over a ton of stuff. Ayame was definitely sort of the biggest character that was omitted, which was strange. They could have just, given her an episode or two at least. I know all of us wish that, but I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately. As much as I wish it would. I really enjoyed the adaptation of Rine. Zorian also asked another question about One Pound Gospel and if it would get an anime adaptation. I feel very strongly that will happen. I can almost, I can't guarantee anything, but I think that's incredibly likely to happen. That will happen.
So much has gotten animated. But
everything of Takahashi's gets an anime, and Gospel is, the right length to easily do in a perfect world, I think 26 episodes would be
That's right.
able to handle it well. I think, 13 episodes would be kind of a rush. But yeah, like a 2-core series.
You wouldn't need any more than that.
No, that could so easily be done. I don't think it'll be done anytime soon because of Mao and Ranma. But yeah, I definitely think that'll happen. That will happen. They'll have to recast it because Hiromi Suru has unfortunately passed away, and Toru, she was
Angela in the OVA,
and Toru Furuya is canceled, for lack of a better term, because of his exploits. So, and he was Kosaku, so they would have to recast it. They'd recast it entirely, I think. But yeah, I think that'll happen. I definitely think that will happen.
Our next question is from Stan NXD. They write, "Hello, good morning, or good evening to you, creators of this magnificent page. Thank you so much. Let's see. I'm a very passionate fan of Rumic World. I'm happy that this page is celebrating its 30th anniversary. Again, thank you. I will continue to support this account any way I can. Thank you. My question is, what is the strangest topic or object that you have ever researched or seen about the Rumic World?" Gosh, that's a good question. Probably, I would say the strangest one was this was a few years ago, but connected to a older topic, we were asked, or people had asked, not specifically to us, about this quote from Takahashi about whether or not Ranma could become pregnant in his female form. And this quote from Takahashi had been floating around online since like the 1990s, when we had first gotten online.
Yep.
We were probably in high school or junior high or something. And it had just never really been attributed. It was very vague, sort of her response. It seems really sort of terse, and it just didn't really sound necessarily like how she would respond to a question from a fan, anyway. And so we dug and ultimately found the source of it.
And the context of it.
And the context that was important. And so we wrote an article about how we found that, and explained what the background of that issue was. And that's been a popular article. I would say that's probably one of the ones that I see shared a lot on Reddit and Twitter.
My answer to this is an article that Harley wrote about a lawsuit that Rumiko Takahashi was involved in that got absolutely, it had never been documented online in any shape or form, really. And Harley was able to get the magazine that had the original story that they published, that she sued them over, and then he was able to find more information about the court proceedings, and we published that. And
it was a Japanese gossip magazine, so it wasn't like an anime or manga publication in Japan. They had, we'll link to the articles that we're mentioning down in the info box, but just to sort of summarize, they had implied that one of her assistants was basically her ghostwriter. The assistant was doing most of the work, and Takahashi sued over that. So yeah, that was an interesting one to research, and again, it was one that it wasn't even something we had heard much about online. There was one or two Japanese sites that had vaguely mentioned the lawsuit, and so we wanted to dig into that and find out the background of what that case was about.
It's really interesting. I recommend it. And that was Harley's. So yeah. Our next question is from Jorel Hamilton. Hello. My question is, how did you come across your Ranma Half knowledge and memorabilia? Big fan of the site. Thank you. I think Harley can probably answer that best.
So, how did we come across it? I guess through Electronic Gaming Monthly. That was the first place that we ever heard about anything related to Takahashi. They were a video gaming magazine here in the United States. They covered import games they mentioned some Mega CD games and some Super Famicom games that were based on Ranma. They just really praised it quite a bit. I think that they probably mentioned that there was no chance of any of those games coming out over here.
Yeah.
Ultimately, one was imported, which was called Ranma 1/2 Hard Battle here. It's English title for that game. And
but we saw it there, yeah.
Yeah.
That was our first introduction to Ranma and sort of the whole concept of anime in general. Even though, we'd grown up with Transformers and Voltron and, Speed Racer, Robotech, Macross, we didn't really know. We were too young as children to know, oh, this is something different.
Yeah.
But Ranma was our first thing where we sort of, oh, this is something, it's uniquely from Japan. This looks interesting, this looks cool.
And we got that before we got any manga or anime.
I think before it was even available.
The video game was the first thing that we got of Takahashi's.
Yep.
It was Takahashi related. But pretty
For the
quickly,
Super Famicom, Super Nintendo.
pretty quickly after that, we started getting the manga and the
Yeah.
anime.
And where did we get memorabilia? It started with Viz's old Viz Shop by Mail, where we would get a VHS tape every 2 months or so with 2 episodes.
For
$25.
$25. It's expensive.
We would, keep our grades up so that we could get an allowance and ask our parents to buy them for us. And we'd get the comics from our local comic book store. They thankfully started getting manga really early on.
These were the comic book format, like 2 chapters per issue.
Once a month.
Once a month.
And then from there, eBay, once we got online, and just started finding stuff on eBay. And then you kind of hit the ceiling with eBay with what you can find. And then once we, had jobs and started making our own money and the internet became more developed, started being able to import stuff from like Yahoo Japan auctions and Bai and things like that.
I would say that there were a few years where we kind of depleted anything on eBay, like that there was just not
anything left.
That there was just no rare items anymore that were in an American eBay market, I guess you could say, that we needed. And then we were having to pay a proxy in Japan to ship things to us. Now they have services for that make it a lot easier. But for a while it was, sending money orders and things like that. It was sort of a complex process.
Yeah, but that's sort of our history of starting collecting and Ranma specifically.
So our next question is from Ornegra. Good evening. Let's see. They have a number of Inuyasha related questions. Let's see. The first one, because he didn't kiss Kagome, Inuyasha, when he returns after 3 years, in that case, they didn't have to prove anything. They knew they loved each other and wanted to be together, so a kiss was needed. I guess they mean wasn't needed, maybe. I guess they're asking if she's commented on the lack of a kiss in the manga.
She hasn't.
She hasn't, really.
Takahashi's works don't have a lot of kissing in them.
Right.
Luminataru don't kiss in the manga. Of course there is in Maison Koku and Ranma. It's just sort of the
comedic, the when he's in his cat mode that
there's a kisses. Then Inuyasha, there's not between Kagome and Inuyasha, and Rine there's not. And Mao,
not yet.
We'll see.
I feel like maybe there will be. They seem a little different, but
yeah, there's not a lot of kisses, so I wouldn't, put some stock in that. And that's not something she's talked about.
Right. The next question was from the same user, again related to Inuyasha. Has she? Let's see. That's the regretted. Oh, the kiss between Kikyo and Inuyasha. Given the criticism she received and the arguments that arose regarding the kiss between Inuyasha and Kikyo, I don't know.
Takahashi's
She's
never
not aware
discussed
of
anything
sort
any
of
like fan reactions really to her decisions. So if there is a blowback, if there is discussion of that, I don't want to say she doesn't care, but she's not
responded to.
Yeah, she's
or
not
acknowledged any of that.
Yeah, exactly. So
I mean, if the question is, why did they kiss and not Kagome? I guess I would say that that's sort of the end of their relationship. That was Kikyo was passing away for good, and in a way, I sort of think of, one's a sort of a young relationship, one's sort of a old
established relationship,
an older, mature relationship. I don't know if I'm sort of phrasing that in a coherent way, but
they were saying goodbye too.
Right, it was a sort of a farewell and permanent farewell acknowledgement.
I don't think there's anything to be jealous over.
No.
Has she ever explained well that Kagome is not Kikyo because she's not a real reincarnation? I don't know what real reincarnation means. She is her reincarnation. She literally, Kagome is Kikyo's reincarnation. Takahashi states that all the time. We'll link to a specific interview where she discusses that. She does say, though, that Kagome has no memories of her previous life as Kikyo, but she is her reincarnation. She's definitely a reincarnation.
Has she ever, has she clarified the difference between the two loves by pointing out that Inuyasha felt infatuation for Kikyo and true love for Kagome? I don't know. Even just kind of I don't know. I'm not sure really how to even answer that. No, other than she has not commented on that. We get a lot of questions sometimes about Kikyo and Kagome things, and sometimes it's just kind of fan debate. There's not really a clear way. There's not a winner.
No.
There's not any way to sort of
I think people want
adjudicate.
To settle arguments. It's
right.
like, well, just read the manga.
Right. Sometimes we get questions and we can kind of tell, there must be some debate somewhere happening that we're being asked to weigh in on, and that's I don't know. I don't know what to say, really.
Too old for that.
Obviously. But yeah, so but just to sort of very clearly answer the question, Takahashi just does not say this is more important. This relationship is more important than this relationship. She's just writing a story. She wants to have conflict. She wants to have romance. She wants to have these elements that make a compelling story, rather than like a contest or this person loves this person more.
But I would say it's obvious, that Kikyo is Inuyasha's past and Kagome is his future.
Right.
So take that as you will. She also asked, has Takahashi ever criticized filler episodes, and has she ever complained about the triangle that was created by Sunrise that does not exist in the manga? Well, it does exist in the manga.
Is that the Kagome Kikyo Inuyasha?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that exists
That's
in the
a real
manga.
thing.
That's, yeah.
Has she ever criticized filler episodes? No. But, and again, we'll link in the comments below. She has given specific feedback about the anime, especially Yashahime. She was very hands-on in what she would allow and sort of would not allow. We'll link to an interview with Sumisawa, the series writer, where she indicated that she did not want Inuyasha and Kagome to have a son, that it would be a daughter.
I think she said it would be too repetitive, basically.
Yes, that it would be, that the young man coming of age story had already been done in Inuyasha. And he wanted to set it originally in the present, where Sesshomaru, his daughters, where Toa and Setsuna and Moroha would come into the present and stay here. Elements of that are at the very beginning, but would stay and slay demons in the modern era. And Takahashi completely shut that down and said, no, it has to take place in the past. And it was going to be more of a comedy, and she said, no, it needed to stay serious. So that's
I
something.
mean, it's broad directions like that. I mean,
Yeah.
she's not writing stories.
Right,
She's
exactly.
not vetoing. That I don't think that they're showing her individual, scripts, and other than just kind of a broad outline.
She did that with the manga though, with the Yashahime manga. She
Right.
was checking that on.
You can read, if you go to our Yashahime manga summaries, the notes. I've included translations of Takashi Shiina's blog for each chapter, and he talks about, in some cases, things that he had ideas for that he presented to Takahashi, different sort of twists in the storyline that she said, like, no, don't do that, or go in this different way. I remember one was about having Sesshomaru, I think, save some character, doesn't come to mind, and she just said no. And he sort of was surprised by how cold she could make him, but he was always very respectful of making sure that he was, writing
to her wishes.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
And then there's one more interview that we'll link to that I can just to answer this question about her comments on the anime with Yashahime, where she told the character designer not to change Miroku's look too much. I think he'd done some designs with him maybe having a beard, and she said absolutely not, no beard, no facial hair. So I mean, it's smaller things like that. It's not like broad things, but yeah.
And well, before we move on, there was one thing that she did express pretty clear dissatisfaction of. Is not from Inuyasha. It was from an Urusei Yatsura episode, which they added a joke where there's these things historically in Japan called fumi-e. They were depictions of Christ. They were Christ's face on these little sort of plates. And to test, to see if someone had converted to Christianity, Japanese officials, this is historical, would have the faithful step on them, essentially. There's a joke in one of the anime episodes of Urusei Yatsura, the original early 80s, where Megane is making girls, I think it's from a volleyball team if I remember, step on a picture of Ryunosuke. And in an interview, and again we'll link to the interview, Takahashi said she thought that was in bad taste, and she didn't.
She really didn't like
that's probably the strongest I've ever seen her say that she didn't like something. And there may be people watching right now that say, well, what about her stuff with Mamoru Oshii? That's, I think, just kind of more complicated than to just say she likes or didn't like, or, just succinctly, without getting into a long tangent about that. She just kind of said,
made an entire video about
that his stuff was kind of his interpretation of Urusei Yatsura, just to make that succinct.
I think she appreciated it for what it is, but it's
Right.
not, she didn't consider it the same thing as her work. So yeah. If after the remake of Ranma, do we think there'll be a remake of Inuyasha as well? One day.
Maybe.
20 or 30 years from now. Maybe. Not anytime soon. They've really,
So much of that
done everything they can do with it.
Yeah.
It's been as close to fully adapted as, I think anything gets, and it's had a sequel. And
I know the final act was kind of compressed. It was, they had a lot to cover in a small number of episodes, and you feel that it was kind of rushed a little bit in terms of just the pacing. But I don't think that that's probably going to warrant anytime soon revisiting.
remakes happen a lot lately. Stuff from the 80s is getting remade. So will stuff from the 90s get remade? Yeah, it will eventually, but just
maybe
not anytime soon. It's just still too recent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
What do you think of the Sesshomaru Rin couple created by Sunrise? Again, the only way that I can approach this is just through the narrative needs of the story. It was decided that they wanted to do a story about the children of Sesshomaru and the children of Inuyasha. Having a child of Inuyasha, that was pretty easy to establish. That was logical who that would be with. That was with Kagome. That made sense. When they decide, though, that they're wanting to have children of Sesshomaru, I mean, there's just not really in the original narrative. He had no romantic relationships in the manga, and so the characters that would make sense for him to have children with were, it was basically just Rin was the only logical choice.
This was something that, really seemed to divide the fandom when it happened, and I don't know, we never really commented on it. I guess for this video, we can comment on it. I have no problem with it.
Yeah,
it just didn't bother me.
It just was what it was. She wasn't a child anymore.
Right.
I think, of course, people were uncomfortable with the idea that he was a sort of a guardian figure or a father figure, for, lack of a better term, when she was a child. Of course, he essentially doesn't age. She had grown up. But just for the narrative needs of, it would be too complicated to have introduced a character you've never seen before, established that that he somehow had a relationship with this person, that he had children with this person, and then that this person is going to be in danger throughout the story,
and have some
kind of emotional resonance
with the audience,
for the audience. And then, and then where's Rin if that was the story? She's just, a villager and so.
Yeah. It never bothered us. And it obviously didn't bother Takahashi, or she would have said no to it.
No, right. So, just from a narrative standpoint, really, I think that was kind of the direction it had to probably go in.
Thank you for your questions.
Yeah, thank you for
all
your
the questions. Our next set of questions comes from Canadian Idiot. How did you discover Rumiko Takahashi? Yeah, video games. I think Harley answered that. It was through a video game magazine was our first hint at her works, and then once we got into Ranma and just fell in love with it, it was let's consume everything that's coming out, and Maison Koku was coming out as a manga first, and Urusei Yatsura, and then the animes. So yeah.
Also from Canadian Idiot, what made you decide to start the site? Whose idea was it? Well, the very quickly after we got online, I built a site for the anime, the OVA series for Please Save My Earth. That was on GeoCities.
And GeoCities was a website that allowed you to create websites. They would give us hosting. Yeah, it was like a little hosting thing. You could create sort of small, little single page or just a handful of pages. And as its name implies, GeoCities, they were based around geographic locations. And so when we first got online, we ended up in a chat room at GeoCities and met a lot of people, and everybody had websites.
Yeah. In
Tokyo. That's where we hung out, Tokyo City of GeoCities, and they would all be anime related or manga related or J-pop related or whatever. And it was just sort of the thing to do amongst our first online friend group, was to have a website.
And there were a lot of Ranma websites, so I knew I didn't know how to build a website, so I wanted to start with something that was not Takahashi related. I wanted to build something that was a little bit more unique. This would have been probably like 94, 95,
maybe, yeah.
A year or two before our site anniversary. This is our 30th anniversary, so that was a little bit before. Just to kind of learn how to code, we had to teach ourselves that.
And then I made a Maison Koku page.
Then he did that, yeah.
And Tomobiki was online before we brought that into...
Which is the Urusei Yatsura portion of our website. That was a separate site.
And then we brought that into Rumic World, and then GeoCities eventually closed down. We bought our own, server space and everything, and sort of started to professionalize things over the decades. So yeah, but it all started there.
It all started with that.
What are your favorite characters in each series? You want to go first?
So yeah, my favorite character is Ranma from Ranma 1/2, and Ranma is my favorite series. That was the first thing I bought. That was the first character that was really appealing to me, and so that will always be my nostalgic favorite. I mean, that sounds like I'm qualifying that. I mean, that's my favorite. That will always be my favorite. If I had to just pick characters from each of her major series that I would say are my favorites. From Urusei Yatsura, I would say maybe like Ryunosuke, or I mean it kind of changes day to day. Ataru I like a lot. Mendo is a lot of fun. So those. From Meizan Koku, I would say Akemi is probably my favorite in Meizan Koku. Ranma from Ranma 1/2. From Inuyasha, it's easily Sango. I always really sort of connected with Sango. And when I lived in Japan, that was the memorabilia. Inuyasha was running while I was living in Japan. So there was a lot of product that you could buy that was Inuyasha related, and I was always looking for Sango related things. I can remember getting little capsule toys, gashapon of Sango while I was over there. I think I got a Kilala keychain while I was over there, and I got a little button, just a little like pin like button that's on my backpack that I had over there that I still take to work every day. So I still have this Sango button. Now that I teach college, so that's still on my backpack. So Sango still travels with me. In Rine, it would be Suzu. I really like her, the little black cat. I like her design and just her personality a lot. And then in Mao, I would say Kagari. I like her attitude and her design a lot too. She's my favorite. What about?
For me, in Urusei Yatsura, it's definitely Ataru. I think he's such a unique character. I really don't think there's anybody else kind of like him in manga and anime. So he's definitely my favorite in Urusei Yatsura. Meizan Koku, that is my favorite series. Godai is my favorite character of all time. So yeah, he's definitely my favorite in Meizan Koku. In Ranma, it's Genma. Not just for his panda form, although I like his panda form a lot and how kind of, lazy and cowardly he is, but also, his sort of horrible father kind of role that he plays.
There's a lot of bad fathers in Takahashi stuff.
So again, was my favorite in Ranma. In Inuyasha, it's Miroku. I've always liked his journey as a character. He's sort of that great mix of tragedy and comedy, maturity. I think he really brings a lot to the series. And for Rine, I would say I started liking Tsubasa Jumonji a lot after the anime, because I thought Ryohei Kimura, his voice actor, did a really good job. And that really started making me like Tsubasa a lot more. Also, Matsugo, he's just so weird and, different. And that's sort of the humor dynamic around him is so unique. I kind of appreciate him, I'll say. In Mao, it's Kamon. I really like Kamon. I'm interested in seeing, while we're recording this, I think there's still a lot of mystery around him to be resolved and his relationship with Masago. So yeah, those are my favorites.
Let's see. The next question is, this is from Canadian Idiot as well. Any advice to others who would like to make their own Franken? Other collectors who want to create archive sites?
We wish you would.
Yeah, we wish that there were more out there.
Please.
I'm just just thinking about it off the top of my head, there's a really great Dragon Ball site. There's a great Gundam repository.
There's a few Sailor Moon ones that are really good. But yeah, I wish there were more. I wish people still built websites just to show their interest and sort of catalog the series, wikis.
Yeah, the fandom
wikis are so soulless and uninteresting.
And there's limits. They're never going to have articles.
Yeah,
they're never going to have
things
interviews translated. They're not going to show a lot of merchandise in that format. And I just like to read sort of the the author, like a one person's kind of approach to tackling a series.
Yeah. Any tips?
Just keep at it.
Keep at it. Also, it helps to have somebody you're working with, like the two of us, that we keep each other motivated. We bounce ideas off each other. We talk about this stuff all the time. You know, it keeps you inspired to continually move forward with your work. So, yeah.
And I would say, you know, don't just stick to one creator, one manga artist, but, you know, bring in their other series. I mean,
I can't imagine somebody, you know.
If I had stopped at Ranma, that would have been, or if we just did Maison Koku and Ranma, which was.
If you like Dragon Ball, you'll probably like Dr. Slump. If you like, you know, Slam Dunk, you'll probably like Vagabond.
Right.
You know, I can't imagine, I just like Inuyasha, I don't like anything else. I mean whatever, but I don't work that way.
There should be, I wish there were sites for like Mitsuru Adachi, like ours. I mean, there have been so many times that I wish somebody did that. Or Naoki Urasawa. Again, he has so many big series. Tezuka, I guess, kind of has a site, his official, that his I guess estate runs, that's pretty good.
But Tezuka in English is a good fan site.
Yeah.
Fan run site.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for it, but yeah, just kind of keeping at it is like the big secret, I guess, to success, and just
perseverance
and slowly accumulating things, and just, you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what anime adaptation has the best soundtrack? Maison Koku.
I would say Maison Koku would probably be my second choice. And again, I'm just thinking, the way I'm approaching this question is, what have I listened to the most? And I think probably in terms of Takahashi's anime works, the soundtrack I've listened to the most is probably the Mermaid Scar OVA soundtrack, which might seem a little obscure, but I think that's what I would probably say. And then Maison Koku probably second. Is I can just remember sitting here in this room, which is where we used to do a lot of our work. We used to have our computer in here, and we would listen to, it seemed like the Maison Koku soundtrack. It was a nice balance of sort of concentration music. We had a lot of Ranma CDs. They were a little too, I think, excitable to to listen to repeatedly, but Maison Koku we listened to a lot. So yeah, I would say Mermaid Scar OVA soundtrack and Maison Koku would probably be the.
All the series have really good music, though.
Yeah.
And Rina is really, I think, underrepresented. It's got only one CD released of it, but it's really good music too.
So the next question is, who are your favorite authors, mangaka, excluding Rumiko Takahashi? So I would say Ryoichi Ikigami, who did Sanctuary and Crying Freeman. He would probably be at the top of that list. Kaoru Mori, she did Emma and A Bride's Tale. Let's see, who else would I think of? Saki Hiwatari, who did Please Save My Earth. She's up there for me. I'm trying to think who. Hiroya Oku, who did Gantz and Gigant and a number of other series. I really like his work. I really like his sort of unique art style, where he's using sort of 3D elements to create his backgrounds. How about you? Who would you?
We read a lot of Junji Ito, of course. He's really caught fire the last decade or so in the United States. We've been into him longer than that, though.
Back in Pulp,
yeah,
he was published.
Osamu Tezuka, obviously. I'm a huge Blackjack fan, but I bought all of his works that are available in English. How can you, if you're interested in manga, how could you not read him? Shotaro Ishinomori, Cyborg 009, Kikaider. I love his stuff. Naoki Urasawa, for sure. We read all of his manga. Those are the big ones. Gosho Aoyama, who does Detective Conan and Yaiba.
I buy everything of his, all the Conan
sure.
and Yaiba stuff.
And then like newer people like is it Shinichi
Sakamoto, who does
like Dracula
and
The Climber and
Innocent.
Yeah.
I would be remiss though. Probably the first manga outside of Takahashi's work that I bought was Masamune Shiro. This is pre Ghost in the Shell, so Tank Police and Appleseed and Black Magic M66. And then Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell also was getting initially the sort of comic book format releases, and I just really liked his artwork and his really dense kind of storytelling. The Ghost in the Shell anime, the new one that is sort of based on his manga, is just now, as we're recording this, debuting. I think some people are surprised by how tonally different it is, but it's very faithful kind of to, I mean, his work is a lot more kind of humorous and playful, I think maybe more so than what people are expecting from that have only seen the Ghost in the Shell anime adaptations prior to this. So yeah, I've always liked his work. He doesn't produce a lot of manga as much nowadays as he used to, but
what is your personal favorite article or interview? We sort of answered this earlier. The lawsuit that Harley researched was really good. But something else that I would recommend, and like I said, we'll link to all these in the commentary, the box below the video, is I guess it's more of an article. It's a profile of Takahashi that was written. It was sort of the first English language profile that was written of her by a guy named Toren Smith, who was a manga translator and publisher in the late 80s, early 90s in the United States as manga was getting started. And he wrote sort of this introduction to Takahashi. And it's been on our website for a long time. And it was sort of a lot of people's introduction to her in the English language sphere. And Toren Smith has passed away now. I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but it's got a lot of sort of factual inaccuracies to it.
I mean, that might be too strong. I mean,
it's got a lot of opinion to it that's not really based in reality. And so I would recommend, that's one of my favorites because of its sort of cultural importance, but also because of the work that Harley did in annotating it and writing notes for it. And that was something that sort of started about 3 years ago of us going back through all of our interviews, all of our articles, and doing sort of a bibliography for them, doing in-text citations and notes, explaining things, because...
saying what page numbers these are from,
right.
Saying what original publication they're from, just being very sort of deliberate about...
fact-checking.
Yeah, fact-checking and just giving context and connecting with other interviews and sort of...
So I think that's an interesting article for its historical importance, but it's also, I think, relevant to see what we do and what we bring to our work in covering Rumiko Takahashi. So that would be mine.
In terms of one that I've written that I'm proud of, I did one, these are kind of not as strongly related to Takahashi. I did one on Makoto Raiku's lawsuit against Shogakukan, a big write-up when he had his falling out with Shonen Sunday and Shogakukan, the publication company that Takahashi also works for. I did another article that I like a lot, and I still revisit it sometimes, which was on Osamu Tezuka and his kind of personality, how he could be really competitive negatively, I would say, with other manga artists. And it just sort of talks about these events throughout his career of trying to sort of one-upsmanship, sometimes really belittling. I can, like with Shotaro Ishinomori, how I would say almost vengeful he was when he thought Ishinomori was getting more attention than him, how sort of petty he could be. I really kind of enjoyed collecting and researching the various kind of anecdotes from those to put that together. That was my own work. In terms of just translation work, I translated an episode of a Japanese late night manga talk show called BS Manga Yawa that was difficult. It was a panel show. There was a lot of crosstalk, and then translating that, transcribing that, and then subtitling that, making sure all the subtitles synced up. I was really proud of how that turned out. And then after about a year of it being on our YouTube page, it got copyright struck. You can still find the transcript. We'll link to the transcript of it, which we host on our website, but the actual video that so much work went into in just terms of subtitling and timing everything, that got taken down, unfortunately. But I was really proud of that. That was just a ton of work to do that one.
What would you do if you ever met Takahashi? I would die. I would just freak out. I think I would realistically just kind of thank her as best I could and try to let her know what an impact she'd had on my life. And
I think it would be, I don't know if I would want to meet her, to be honest with you. I think
I don't want to meet her.
Would you? Yeah, I certainly have questions. I don't think there would be any set of circumstances where I could even ask her a question. But I've translated so many interviews with her. Our website has, I think, 150 interviews going back from the early 1980s, maybe even late 1970s, early 1980s. So for sure, up till today, I've essentially read every kind of question that's been put to her by interviewers. And so there's a lot of questions that I would want to ask her that I haven't seen asked repeatedly. Sometimes she gets the same questions a lot.
What would you ask her? What's one question you ask?
So she's talked about as a child, the first time she got praised for her drawing abilities, this deer that she drew when she was a very small child. I've always wondered, though, when was the first time that she realized as a writer that she was funny? Like, when was the first time that she knew that she had a good sense of humor, like not just a good sense of humor, but like a very honed sort of like when she could make her friends laugh. I'm interested in her sort of writing. She's asked some, not a lot, but some about her just drawing abilities, but she's not often asked about just the sort of writing component very often.
I think humor's hard. It's hard to be funny.
Yeah.
Consistently.
Yeah. That's what I think appealed to us about her work.
Yeah.
We'd been reading X-Men and things before we discovered her, and there was just not any humor really in American comics that we were familiar with. And so that was really
one of the things that really set us down the path of manga.
Yeah.
But Takahashi specifically. Favorite item owned and why? The first kind of big rare item we got is this very small collection of her short stories that she had sort of professionally printed.
Oh yeah.
It's got a really limited run. It collects some of her doujinshi work, so it's not her Shogakukan material.
From earlier than that.
Yeah, and it has an A printing and a B printing, and the A printing is even smaller, and it was just for like her professional friends, like editors and things like that. And then there was a limited version of the B printing. These are all numbered.
Right, they're all numbered.
We
have the B printing.
We have a B printing one. I've only seen it online, it for sale 2 other times in all these years, all these decades. So that was kind of our first big, wow.
Yeah.
What is this? So yeah, that holds a special place in our heart.
I mean, that's something really rare. I would say something that's not rare, not particularly expensive, was the first Ranma color pages that I got in a Shonen Sunday. That was Shonen Sunday. Ranma's on the cover. It's just a kind of big close-up of his face. Ranma, I want to say it's from 1991. And so that was really exciting. We've recently, I guess it was last year, or maybe it was 2 summers ago, that we finished finally getting every color page that she's ever produced, which was in itself a 20+ year journey or 25-year journey. And so that was kind of the first step down that path of finding her work and collecting it. I think were we in college when we got that?
Or maybe the summer between
starting
high school
going.
and
Yeah.
college.
So
Around there. Kids, just
Yeah.
kids.
it was, so that was exciting. And again, that's not particularly expensive. Not impossible to find nowadays, but it's a special memory for me.
After 30 years, what is your message to fans of your site and fans for Rumiko Takahashi? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your support over the decades. We're not going anywhere. We're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep covering Mao and unearthing more articles and interviews for the older series. But yeah, we're just so humbled. We had a tweet just today. It was just Takahashi's comment in Shonen Sunday, and it's got like 2.5K likes on Twitter, and it's like, that's just unbelievable. I'm so happy that people are still responding to Takahashi's works in the way that they are, and yeah, it's just been such a blessing, and thank you.
So the next question is from Ranma Podcast. The Ranma Podcast says, "Hey guys, congrats again on 30 years. Thank you. It was fun learning about you and seeing the stuff you've done over the years. We did a podcast with them a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
it was Christmas time, I think, about 6 months ago. What are some of your favorite stories of meeting people through your research? Have you encountered some cool stuff unrelated to Rumiko Takahashi that you were tempted to archive or write about anyways?" We've met a number of people. Particularly, this would probably have been in the early 2000s. I think we went to Otakon for 2 years.
3 years.
Or 3 years, was it? And we have a message board. It's, message boards have kind of fallen out of favor. It's still linked on the website. And we had met a lot of people through that visited us. And so at one of the Otakons, we met them, and that was fun to see them and get to know these people that we've been speaking with for, by then, a number of years. I met a girl that I was in a relationship for quite a lot of years with. I moved out to Texas to be with her. I met her through our website, and I finished my education there because of her. But because I went out there because of her, and to Texas, and grad school, did that there. It's been life changing. We met so many people. Harley moved to Japan because of Takahashi. Yeah, minored in Japanese in undergrad, so that kind of determined where I went to undergrad school.
I made a lot of good friends over there. So we've met so many people, and we still do. We still meet people. We haven't met them in person, but.
And then the second part of your question, has there ever been anything we were tempted to archive or write about that was unrelated to Takahashi? Because we got so many Shonen Sundays, just through the process of collecting her work, I think that there have been times where we always kind of just jokingly say we should make like a big Shonen Sunday dedicated site that sort of talks about all of the series that have appeared in Shonen Sunday, just like in a brief way. Just the scope of that would just, I think, be too much. Especially with what we're doing for Takahashi's work.
We have no free time.
No, there's just no
time
available to do that.
Yeah, we do have jobs.
Right. And so I think that's probably the only other thing that we've ever kind of...
But yeah, just through magazines, Animages and Animedies and stuff, there's, so much. If anybody ever, I wish people would reach out to us and say, hey, do you have this issue and can you scan blah, blah, blah. We'd be happy to.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that it's like, I wish this had a place online. I wish somebody was, archiving this. But yeah, there's lots of stuff. Lots. This is AF 321. Another fan, 321. Hi, here's some questions for your 30th anniversary. Thank you. I use your website a lot when reading through all the Rumic works, and I'm genuinely am thankful. What are your thoughts on the ups and downs of Viz's translations? Rine having honorifics preserved and Mal not having them seems wild to me. When Rine was her first manga in the United States that had all these honorifics in it, and that was a big adjustment because not so much of everything before Rine had been kind of handled by a translator and a rewriter, a guy named Gerard Jones. And I don't want to get into his story too much here, but that might be something we ultimately write about on the site one day. And Rene was the first one that he was not involved in. I got used to it fast.
I mean, Viz's just kind of editorial, I guess, in-house style is not to have honorifics, right? I mean, like Detective Conan doesn't have no. And so that's just, I think, just historically been their approach. I guess it's their standard style. I don't know, but Rene had them. And so that was unusual. I think it's helpful. I wish that they would do that. Like with Mao, I can say there are times where to an English reader, you don't realize how sort of deferential Mao is when he speaks to Hyaka or Kamon, or any of the sort of senior apprentices, even the ones that he's at times kind of allied against. Sort of early on, he's very sort of humble when he speaks to them, even after 900 years. That's sort of lost in translation when they're omitting the sort of honorifics that come with that. So I do wish that they would. I can say though, in our interview translations and things, we leave the honorifics in to try to just denote how the speakers are sort of referencing other people. I'm doing an interview right now with Takahashi from like I think it's 1980 or 1982, very early on. And it's interesting that she's talking about these other manga artists and she refers to them as san instead of sensei. And again, that would have been, in my opinion, because she was new, she didn't have like this kind of personal relationship with any of these people. Nowadays, she always refers to every other manga artist as so-and-so sensei. I can certainly say, though, just from a translation point of view, there are times where so-and-so san, so-and-so san, so-and-so san. In English, it can read sort of as repetitive. And so I can understand why, maybe historically people omitted that, because just in terms of the sort of flow of the English language, it can be a little it does sound at times, even when I'm sort of rereading back through a translation that I've done, just proofreading it, I'm like, it can sound clunky in English. And so I can understand why historically they may wanted to have removed it. But in terms of the information and the connotation that it provides, I think it's important.
And I think, for the most part, the English language audience is at a place now that, manga and animes existed so long that you don't have to make these changes, that you can be more faithful in that way. So, yeah, it was an adjustment though.
What is your favorite Rumiko Takahashi one-shot? Mine would be Reserved Seat, I think is what I would choose as mine, which is also in sort of a more literal translation of the title was Invitation to Takarazuka. It's where a sort of visual kei, sort of glam rock guy goes to Takarazuka, which is an all-female stage review where they sort of cross-dress, they play male roles. I was introduced to that through this story, this concept of Takarazuka. It's a real thing in Japan. And so when I lived there, I went to a Takarazuka show because I had read about this. And then when I got back, that was in undergraduate school, when I got back and went to grad school, Takarazuka was a part of my art history graduate thesis that I wrote. And so, yeah, I would say that was, because of that was a big one. Another, just two other ones that I want to make sure I mention, because I just like these stories, and they're newer stories. They're not some of her kind of classic short stories. Revenge Doll, I really like that one a lot. I think just because tonally it's different. She wrote this for, I think, Big Comic Superior Big Comic. And so it's a little more dark. The protagonist is sort of just a negative, unlikable guy. He's not one of the old men that she writes about for Big Comic Original. So it's just a little bit different than what she's been doing lately. And then Empty Apartment, which is another one that's not in Big Comic Original. I think it was in, I don't know if it was in Spirits. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. It's just a really good sort of horror story. And again, just her ability to write these really strong, supernatural, just totally no comedic kind of anything in them. I think it just continues to impress me how good she is at those kind of stories. What about you?
My favorites are probably, I really like Help. a lot. Because that was one of the early, that was probably one of the first, that was the first story we got as soon as it came out.
Yeah.
We had those color pages, within a week of that being published in Japan. And so it holds a special place in my heart because of that.
So that doesn't sound hard today, but that was
right,
difficult
hard
to get, to find someone that sold that magazine and to order it.
And get it to Mississippi, where we are. So yeah. And then Laughing Target and When My Eyes Got Wings. Those are two kind of horror ones, suspense horror. So yeah, those are my favorites.
Let's see, who is your favorite of Rumiko Takahashi's many middle-aged men from her one-shots? So I would say you can kind of divide her middle-aged men into sort of two categories. There's one, they all kind of look similar. They all have the little oval glasses that white out, and they have kind of this little sort of side-swept hair. They look kind of worn down and kind of beaten down. I don't like those guys as much as I like the ones that still seem a little bit to have some vitality to them, and sort of look a little bit cool. Mr. Fua from Wandering Family F, he still seems like he has like a little bit of like joy in his life, and he sort of dresses a little bit better. He's one that I like a lot. And then Mr. Domoto from
In Lieu of Things?
No, As Long As You're Here. He's the one that wears the bunny costume. Again, he just has like this kind of anger to him, and he's a little bit more bulky. He looks a little bit more like kind of like Genma, I would say, in like Ranma 1/2. So I really like those kind of old men that have sort of a uniqueness. And I also want to just mention that this is not from one of her short stories. This is from Mao recently. Dr. Shibasato, they just did the anime episode with him. He's a very minor character, but I just really like his design. He has kind of this wavy hair and these kind of little round glasses. It just seems like, just when I saw him, I was like, oh wow, she really invested a lot of time in drawing this guy and sort of creating him. I thought maybe, he's going to be a recurring character. He's not. He just showed up for like 1 or 2 chapters, and then he sort of disappeared. But I just liked his design a lot. I thought he stood out.
The protagonist from Red Bouquet, I like a lot. He dies, and his ghost kind of hangs around, but he died in this really embarrassing way. He was at an office party, and so he has a face drawn on his chest and a necktie on his head. I think he's probably one of my favorites because he's so kind of ridiculous, but the story itself is really moving in a way, in its own way. So yeah.
Let's see, of all the interviews that you've translated, which one proved to be the most challenging? For me, it was the BS Manga Yawa one that I mentioned earlier. There were just so many speakers. I think there were 4 people on the panel. There were 2 different announcers. And then some of just what they were saying was kind of esoteric. And there was a lot of crosstalk as well. So it was a challenging one to do.
Harley's the real translator. I just have to get him to check everything that I do using computer translation and get him to go over it and check everything. So it's hard for me to answer that question. But yeah, that's one of the bigger ones that he's done for sure. And finally, any big changes planned for the website? Harley wants to redo the character encyclopedia at some point. We are going to obviously continue with articles and interviews. We've talked about...
I want to redo all the items and locations and like techniques. I just think that the formatting of that just needs to be improved, and we need to have the Japanese text with those, and we need to probably say like, this is the Japanese name, this is the English manga translation of that name, this is the English anime translation of that name, because sometimes they vary, and that's another thing that we've kind of, there's not really any good answer. How do we refer to this consistently within the site? For example, you could take something from Inuyasha. Do you call it Windscar? Do you call it Kaze no Kizu? And if you say, we're going to call this Windscar, if we're going to call it that, the manga called it Scar of the Wind originally, I remember. But so if you're going to call it Windscar, then does that mean that you need to call Miroku's wind tunnel,
or Kazan.
or kazana, or air rip, I think was how they referred to it originally in the manga, because the reason that they don't match up necessarily is because the mouth flaps, they have to have it sort of fit in the flaps of the mouth when they translate it. So
things like that.
Yeah, and we have to decide sort of how are we going to refer to this. Do you refer to Ryoga's technique as breaking point or Bakusai Tenketsu? But there has to be some internal logic within the whole site, not just for Ranma and Inuyasha, but within the entirety of the site. And so that means that if we call it Bakusai Tenketsu for Ryoga, then why do we not call it Kaze no Kizu for Inuyasha? I mean, but ultimately we want it to be consistent, but also legible to readers. We want it to, not seem awkward, and where they're saying like, what is that? What are they talking about? It's just this Japanese term.
And our own, we are an English language website primarily.
Yeah.
So things like that. But yeah, a lot of stuff that seems small that will take a lot of time.
It'll take a lot of time to redo those. Yeah.
But that's it for the questions.
Yeah. So thank you for your support over the last 30 years. Thank you for submitting these questions, and we hope to be here for at least another 30 years, and just continue, and just always appreciate your support, whether it's through the website or through Twitter or through YouTube or through Facebook or Instagram. You can find us on Blue Sky at all those various outlets. So thank you.
Thank you.